So we mentioned that the days between Pesach and Shavuos, the days of the counting of the Omer, then obviously the main observance is the actual count of the Omer each and every night. But that these days have become overlaid in Jewish history and Jewish tradition with a sense of national tragedy and national mourning. One of the primary reasons that we understand, and the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Akiva's 24,000 students who are going to be the tradition. Rabbi Akiva was one of those moments that he was a link in the chain of tradition, and he was going to pass it over to all of his students. But they died because they didn't act with respect one to another, and the Talmud says that they died a horrible death, some sort of respiratory death, askara, some call that diphtheria, croup, but they died a horrible death. And then Rabbi Akiva started again, but when all of his students, with 5 students, and from there we get the whole Shalshelas HaMasorah, we get the tradition, but the Jewish world, in the words of the Talmud, was dark because of it. Later on, these days in history marked the Crusades and blood libels and a lot of different and difficult things for the Jewish people. And so, almost universally, there developed a custom within the Jewish people to treat at least a portion of these days as days of national mourning. And there are generally 2 customs. Each custom has permutations, and those are not the only 2 customs. There are generally 2 recognized customs. One says that we observe this period of national mourning from the beginning of the count of the Omer, from the second day of Pesach, until the 33rd day of the Omer. And again, there are permutations in Ashkenazic tradition. So once the morning of the 33rd day of the Omer comes, the period of mourning is over. And in Sephardic tradition, you have to complete the 33rd day, and it's not until the morning of the 34th. But basically, until 33 days of the Omer have elapsed, there is an observance of national mourning, and that observance expresses itself in 2 primary ways. Number 1, that people don't get married, and number 2, that one doesn't shave or take haircuts. And as a result of this general idea, so pulled along with that are musical celebrations or thing of the sort, whether that means just listening to music or celebrating with music and dancing. But celebrations are set aside to show this national mourning. The second tradition says no. It's based on midrashim of how and when the students died. The second tradition says no. Until Rosh Chodesh Iyar, there's no observance of mourning. The observance of mourning begins Rosh Chodesh Iyar, continues until right before Shavuos, 3 days before Shavuos. However, on the 33rd day of the Omer, the observance of mourning is suspended because for that day, the deaths of Rabbi Akiva's students did not occur. So again, according to both traditions in the Ashkenazic world, the 33rd day of the Omer is a day of celebration, or at the very least, a day when the restrictions are lifted. And again, in the Sephardic world, it's the 34th day of the Omer. But that during whichever period one doesn't shave, haircuts, no marriages, and therefore no celebrations, certainly that include music, and to some that means not listening to music at all. You'll ask, wait a minute, how can that first tradition start from the second day of Pesach? The second and third and fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh and eighth days of Pesach are Yom Tov. What do you mean mourning? And the answer is, you're right. There is no mourning on the holiday. However, since for a different reason, on Pesach, even during Chol HaMoed, we don't take haircuts or shave. The rabbis made a gzeira, an injunction, that on Chol HaMoed Pesach and Chol HaMoed Sukkot, one is not allowed to shave or get a haircut, because if they allowed us to, we'd get lazy before the holiday, and we wouldn't come into the holiday having shaved and got the haircut and groomed properly. So they said, that's it. On Chol HaMoed, certainly on Yom Tov and Shabbos you can, but even on Chol HaMoed, can't take haircuts, can't take shave. So since, even though it's for a totally different reason, since the fact is the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth day of Pesach, we haven't shaved and we haven't taken haircuts, it is considered as if that observance of not taking haircuts started from the second day of Pesach, and even though it's not because of mourning, but in essence satisfies that tradition. Now, just a couple of quick things. You can't cheat one to the other. In other words, you can't say, well, I'll shave and take haircuts on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, but I'm starting the observances from the second day of Pesach. It's one or the other. And either way, on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, you don't shave, you don't take haircuts, because either you've already started since the second day of Pesach and it continues till the 33rd day of Yomer, or you start on Rosh Chodesh Iyar and you're continuing until 3 days before Shavuos. But either way, Rosh Chodesh Iyar, you do not shave and take haircuts. However, this year, since there is a confluence, and by the way, and on Erev Shabbos, you don't either, because, again, there's no point, then there's no tradition. However, this year, since there's a confluence, on Friday, you have both Rosh Chodesh Iyar and Erev Shabbos. So the Mishnah Berurah says those two things together suffice to set aside the mourning in terms of taking haircuts, and therefore on Erev Shabbos, which is Rosh Chodesh Iyar, which is the day before Shabbos Rosh Chodesh Iyar, because it's 2 days, you can shave and can take a haircut. We'll discuss later on when it gets closer. We'll discuss Lag BaOmer, but that's the basic thumbnail sketch of the observances in this period of time. And yeah, in the previous session, we did the counting, and so that's the basic general idea of the days of Sfiras HaOmer.